Assalamu alaikum. This is Amira. Welcome to Emotional Evolution, where we focus on our own emotional evolution because when we change, life around us changes. And today you are talking to Amira.
And Fatima, clinical psychologist. Welcome to our session today. We are going on the same sort of lens of looking at our early belief systems and our patterns of behavior and the relationships that we find ourselves in and the situations and what keeps that going. We previously talked about this being called a schema, and that when it develops early in childhood, it's there to protect us because the environment required us that protection. So today we wanted to sort of discuss a topic that comes up in therapy and conversations all the time. And it can come up in different ways for different people. But it's like this tendency about feeling like we are, you know, constantly a bit on edge in our relationships. We're either sort of clinging to a relationship, maybe a few years into it, really obsessing about what our partner is doing, where they are, if they're going to leave us, or then sort of withdrawing and not wanting to engage in a relationship altogether because, it feels uncomfortable. We're worried about someone discovering our own thoughts and emotions and if they'll hurt us in any way. So it's a bit of a protection mechanism. So what we sort of label this, or I guess what it's sort of called, is sort of abandonment instability schema. um, so yeah, it sort of comes from when early on in childhood, when it's not necessarily that there wasn't people around us. We could have had parents, caregivers that were there, but they were emotionally unavailable. So they might have been very busy. If we turned to them for support or advice or connection, they might have been really angry or irritable. And so we early on found out that we would get rejected or there'd be no safety and security, no reassurance there. So it can develop in those situations. So we end up feeling like, we're alone, we're isolated, people will leave us. It can also happen as well. Often we see in like separation, divorce circumstance, maybe a mother or a father left the relationship, they already weren't really there for the child. And so it's more around the how we saw or viewed the situation that, it doesn't feel like my parents or my caregivers have been there for me. And then as we grow older and we start to think about developing long term relationships or companionship, we worry about those people not being there for us and running away or being left alone. Or then it's just easier to then cope by being busy with life and working and trying to find fulfillment in areas outside of our relationship, which leaves us feeling a bit lonely, but we sort of mask it with like avoidance and distraction, keeping busy. So yeah, that's sort of the crux of the roots of where the schema develops and why it develops. And we're sort of going to talk more in detail about sort of how else it can come across and what to be aware of.
Did you want to go through like some of the behaviors that people can see within themselves if they have those schemas? There's 10 that we've got outlined, and then I'm happy to like jump in with my bits.
Yeah. So I think I covered it a little bit, but I'll go over it again. So there's definitely people will often say that they can come across as quite clingy and scared, like even if their partner is going for work or going to meet up with a friend, they will ask, where they're going, what time they're going. They'll feel a bit vulnerable that, the partner's going alone, and they think that the partner's pulling away from them. So there's a lot of anxiety in the relationship, and sometimes micro monitoring. So looking at a lot of text messages, emails. Obviously, I mean, I'm not. Sometimes there can be relationships where there might be the lack of trust, and this sort of overlaps with the trust, like not trusting people as well. But yeah, that's on a little bit of another tangent. They can get quite obsessive in relationships. So again, looking really not wanting to know all the places that their partner's going to, what they're doing in the day, questioning them, looking for signs that their partner's feelings have changed towards them. So if their partner, comes home and they're tired and they don't make eye contact, or they haven't given you a hug, or haven't sort of in the phone call, haven't left the phone call saying that I love you, they can start feeling a big sense of like rejection or that abandonment come up, like something wrong. Um, difficulty focusing on your own life when you're in a relationship. So constantly sort of thinking and being vigilant, and hyper aware of how the other person is responding and reacting, rather than sort of what it is that you need to do in the day, in the week, what sort of fulfills you. Um, and then also worrying that sometimes even like small arguments, it will lead to an end of a relationship. So almost having a belief that at the end of the day, this relationship probably won't work out and this person's going to leave me. I'll be left alone. Um, and also feeling unsafe to express how you really feel, because you're worried that if I tell this person how I'm really feeling, if I'm feeling upset or angry, or like I didn't trust them, they will sort of leave me because they don't want a bar of me. So just really feeling rejected.
And you might not even say that to yourself that they're going to leave me. You'll just feel very hesitant to share what's truly going on for you. And when people are really feeling this way, they're often not in touch with that part of them. They just notice that they feel really uncomfortable to go any deeper.
It's like high anxiety.
Like you just feel really
Just
uncomfortable.
feeling like something's going to go really wrong. You might notice that your heart's racing. You have a sinking feeling
and
in
you
your
think
stomach.
you might as well just end it anyway because it's not going to work out anyway. You'll probably cement it that way, that it's too difficult. It's not going to work out anyway.
And usually, I think the inner dialogue we do see is that people say they start blaming their partner. So,
Yeah.
like, oh, they should have told me where they were going, or they could have told me that they loved me. Like, how difficult is that? They come across as so cold. So it will be like an outward blame, based on sort of how we're feeling. But sometimes we're not in touch, like especially when we might have not done sort of much work in the past or therapy. It can take some time to develop that understanding and awareness of when my heart's racing or my gut is getting tight, or my mouth is going dry. These are some of the worries and the thoughts that are going through my mind about me or this relationship.
Yeah, and had you gone through yep. And so basically I'm going to jump in and I'm going to just go into um what you might generally feel. So if you do have this abandonment schema, um, often you'll just feel a little on edge in your relationships. And this this whole schema comes from perhaps you having unpredictable parents. And I'm going to explain what that means. So if your caregivers were unpredictable, it doesn't mean that they were physically unpredictable, like they were here 1 minute, next 1 minute. It doesn't only just mean that, it could mean that as well. Another big thing that can cause abandonment schema is if your family members or your caregivers were emotionally unpredictable. So that means something like that sometimes you feel like you can open up to them and talk to them and tell them what's really going on for you. Other times when you tell them that, you end up getting a negative reaction from them. Like they might blame you, they might shame you, they might criticize you, they might start raging at you, get really angry at you, or make you wrong in some sort of way. So when you're getting this unpredictable message that, okay, sometimes I can tell my mom or my dad how I'm really feeling, and other times like they will just lose their marbles, that is a sign that your parents or your caregivers had emotional unpredictability. The reason why we're highlighting this is because the abandonment schema is one of the most common schemas. We pretty much all may have had it if you were raised in the 90s, 80s, and beyond, and perhaps even in the 2000s, early 2000s, but it's a common thing because parenting was done in that way. So parents were not taught to be non-reactive. They parented from a reactive place. And there's a difference between discipline and there's a difference between being reactive. So I'm not talking about parents that don't discipline, because some people will hear this and say, oh, they're trying to say that, well, parenting is terrible these days. You can't even discipline your kids. You can put down firm, solid boundaries, and I won't go into that too much. But this is unpredictable parenting, and you'll know it within yourself. You'll know that perhaps there's only one or two people you feel truly safe with to actually open up. With other people, you feel like you have to kind of hide a lot of what you are or what you're truly feeling, or what you've truly gone through, because you know what they're going to say to you is going to be a judgment or a criticism, or they're somehow going to blame you. So this is kind of where it comes from. And they might also have been unpredictable because they were just going through their own stuff. They most likely had their own ritualistic patterns they couldn't snap out of, their own mental health issues, their own emotional instability, or they're just focusing on things that they were very worried about, like overworking in terms of work and other things, instead of probably being aware of how important being emotionally available to your children is for your children. Um, so when we do have these abandonment schemas, what actually happens is, whenever we come into contact with someone and we're starting to develop a more close relationship, you may notice that, especially if they have traits of your caregivers, you may notice that your like alarm bells just go off and you feel a little on edge, like you have to be performative. You might not actually feel fear, but you might feel like, oh, I've got to put on my nice girl behavior, or I've got to say the right thing instead of saying how you truly feel. You might need to get agreeable, or you might notice that. And I'm basically talking to us Muslim women, because that's what we tend to do as our fear response. We end up pleasing most of the time. You might even please but be angry, be pleasing on the outward, but internally being like, why do I have to, like, why are they telling me to do this? So you'll notice that you can't really truly be authentic. And another trait of this abandonment schema is that this abandonment schema, it's a we end up abandoning our own relationships. We end up abandoning ourselves because we can't actually hold true to our relationship. So they call it self-perpetuating. It's like a self-sabotage, because when you have these traits, you can't hold a healthy relationship with anyone. You'll actually invite them to leave because of your traits, by becoming over clingy, over worried, over checking, over controlling. That's going to cause them to leave. So I was going to go into some typical behaviors of this schema, but Fatima, I just thought to pause there and get your input on what I've said.
Yeah, I think self-perpetuating, we talk about like that self-sabotage, it doesn't feel good, and people can be like, what, you're saying I have it and I'm just keeping it going. I think it's not about a blame, but it's about self-reflection, that these things happen so subconsciously. They developed for a reason at a time where it helped us survive, and that when they continue to come up in our adulthood, there are relationships that we have that it it doesn't create a circumstance that's ideal, because we're continuing to feel vigilant, on edge, and we're sort of introducing a way of moving forward where we don't need to be in that scared, unsafe state all the time, where we can actually learn to develop healthy, secure, safe relationships, with the people around us. Obviously, you know, in with people that have those somewhat healthy traits. But I think we were also discussing the idea of, often when we have a schema, we end up finding that we have attract, or we end up being in a relationship with partners or companions that have a similar schema, but it looks different.
Yeah, you can have the same schema, but just like how we talked about this abandonment schema, like you might be really clingy while your husband might be very occupied, and he's too occupied to be emotionally available to you, or vice versa. Or you might, like, you can even do it with your children. If you don't have a healthy schema, if you've got this abandonment schema, you might avoid getting emotionally close to your kids. So I've seen that happen as well, where people want to be close but they feel quite uncomfortable getting too close or too emotional. Or even with your husband, you might feel like you need to just do all the right things by him because he's going to leave you, and you can't truly, like, express what you truly want to keep you very happy and fulfilled in the relationship. So let's say all you wanted to do was like a course, or like a part-time job, or maybe do some charity work or something, but you know what he's wanting out of you. So you kind of dumb that down and you stay in the relationship, but you'll never feel totally fulfilled. And so he also misses out because he's not going to get the lit up version of you. He's not going to get that happy version of you that actually adores him, because you'll probably end up resenting him, because part of he might have an abandonment schema that if you go do these things, you won't like him anymore. And so, or, women, like, I think we hear it in a way that, oh, women are going to turn arrogant, or they're going to become like this or that. But often what ends up happening is when we help someone meet their needs, they end up flourishing even more. And it's when we're clinging or controlling or obsessing or shutting someone down, we never will find that satisfaction and that emotional intimacy that we're looking for. And this is a side topic, and it's a bit of a, like, not a PG topic, but when we're not emotionally close, so when we don't have emotional intimacy, sometimes some people, and it's more prevalent in men, they compensate by physical intimacy. So you might resent that, or vice versa, where you might feel like, I don't feel very close to this person emotionally. However, like, they're always wanting something, like a lot of physical intimacy. And that's another sign that, like, some people, and it just depends on the type. So I don't want to start anything here where, like, when it's more like outside the norm amount of intimacy, that's a sign that someone has a bit of an abandonment schema, because they can't actually go in closer emotionally with someone, and they just need to, because we are humans, we need to connect. They're going to need to connect in an unhealthy way, and that's a topic for another time. But I just thought to quickly race through some typical behaviors of this schema. So in summary, like, you're either going to be clingy to your significant other, you become very possessive, controlling, or jealous. And I want to dissect jealousy, because people often will say, "That's not I'm not jealous," but then what they're describing to me is absolute jealousy. Did you want to describe what jealousy is? Like, you don't want someone to have the other thing, or
I'm happy for you too. Yeah.
Okay, I'm actually going into the definition now, and I'm just wondering if I'm saying it all correctly. But it's basically when you're feeling like, why does that person have this and I don't have it? Or why do you do it for that person and you don't do it for me? So jealousy is when you're in that comparison with someone else, opposed to you just sitting in yourself and saying, hey, this is a need I have, and giving yourself permission to have that need, or have that. It might be an item, it might be an emotion that you want, it might be a connection you want. So it's about, like, in being in comparison to someone else and not wanting good for them, or perhaps wanting what they have. That's what it is in a nutshell. Another other traits that you will have if you've got this schema, you'll constantly want reassurance. Do I look good? Am I too fat? Do you love me? Do you love your food? Do you like what I made? So you constantly want that reassurance. That, or am I the prettiest? Like, that they don't find anyone else attractive, just you. Or you're the only most attractive person, which of course it's a very unhealthy for them to express that they find other people attractive. So, but you would want that assurance. You might go fishing for it and asking them. You might also become very hyper focused on what that person does, and um, how they how they mingle with people. And you'll become hyper vigilant. You're always looking for signs that perhaps the relationship is going to end. Perhaps they're going to cheat on me, or they're, and you might even say things, you actually actively say things that were going to deter them, like, you're more married to your family than you are with me, or you don't give that much time to me, you're always giving it to your friends, or you're always doing stuff for your mother and you're not doing it for me. So I hope what everyone took away from this is, in a nutshell, like, when you have an abandonment schema, whatever you say and the way you behave, you're actually causing the other person to abandon you, because you within yourself have been modeled that people leave, people abandon me, people don't understand me. So, in a nutshell, what you do is you say all of the agitating things and you do all of that, the agitating behaviors that eventually cause the relationship to end. And it's obviously not because you want to, it's because you haven't been modeled what's, even like conflict, you haven't been modeled like healthy conflict. What do you think, Fatima?
Yeah, I agree. This is about working on ourselves And yes, there can be a circumstance where it's relationships, it does take two to tango, and we can react and respond to each other. But this is looking at what, in terms of our own patterns and our own beliefs, how we keep a situation going, and that when we have an awareness and we get the support to heal from it, how we can sometimes and often, and what we see in therapy is we end up feeling more at ease, more calm, feel like we're secure and healed. And that has knock-on effects on the types of relationships and the communication and the behaviors that we engage in. So we hope that this was informative in terms of identifying any themes or patterns that can come up and how it can come up, and it can help sort of build, awareness and empathy that, often the relationships that we have, whatever, others are suffering from, we often can find that, we all in some way are connected and go through very similar human emotions and experiences, and just being able to hold that compassion and love and understanding for each other so we can develop more harmonious and understanding relationships and infuse our relationships with all those prophetic qualities that we hear about of kindness and love and attention. So I think that's the main intention behind raising all of this.
Yeah, it's not to look at it and then find these traits within your partner and use it against them. Or even like when I said that you can keep tabs on people, like asking your partner where they're going isn't keeping tabs on them, or when they're arriving home isn't really keeping tabs on them. It's kind of going on beyond that. And it's also the way you say it as well.
It's also about noticing, is this actually making me feel better, or am I relying on validation from this person in order to feel good? And often when we find that it's a need that we have, like my partner should fix this for me and they should make it better, if we're getting triggered by and we're wanting a certain response from them, that is showing it's I guess a telltale sign that there's something going on within us that might benefit from some work and attention. And that we, I guess the model and the theory that we hold is that we hold that wisdom to be able to work on ourselves and reassure ourselves and
take responsibility, like taking emotional responsibility. So if you have an issue, you have to bring it up as your issue, not that they are the issue. Speaking from the I and saying, hey, this is for me, when this happens, this is how I feel. And then requesting an accommodation to that. Do you mind if you could do blah, 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 opposed to you just speaking at them and saying, you do this and you do that.
And you need to understand.
You need to understand.
You need to do this.
No one actually needs to understand anything or do anything. We actually need to voice what our needs are, because that's another topic for another day. Like it's called like toxic versus non-toxic communication. And I think when we do learn the skill of how to talk in a non-toxic way, we aren't going to invite fights. And there's also boundaries we can set around toxic communication so we don't engage with people that do talk that way on that level where we're going to get caught up in a ugly kind of conversation. So that's another whole subject. But for this week, if you can notice, like, where in your life do you feel like, hey, I'm actually worried that my partner or the ones closest to me might leave me, might abandon me, or do I hold that abandonment, or do they hold that abandonment? And if they do, or if I do, how can I reassure myself? Is there something I can do to reassure myself, or is there somewhere I need to go to gain some extra like support and help so I can work on this? That's the main message that we want to send through this this episode.
Inshallah. We hope this was informative. Take care. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.